Hey guys, it's Ryan, and today we're going to look at a feature of the ATEM Mini that I am very fond of because I'm an audio engineer. So we're going to look at the audio features of this and see what's nice and see what maybe Blackmagic can improve on. Let's take a look. First off, we're going to go over the actual audio functions of the hardware itself. Then we'll look into the software and see a couple of other things that you can do in there to make your audio sound really good on a live stream. So both the ATEM Mini and the ATEM Mini Pro both have 1/8" inputs on the back here, microphone inputs. They are also line inputs, which no one ever really talks about. I'm not sure why, but they can be selected to be line inputs as well. So if you're coming off of a mixer, you'll want to switch that to line, and I'll show you how to do that in the software. It's only doable in the software, so we have to go there to do it. They are 1/8" inputs, which I understand as far as room goes, that's kind of what they wanted to keep it to, was 1/8", just to save space in the back. Professional inputs like XLR or even 1/4" TRS is preferred, but 1/8" is okay if that's all the room you have. So on the hardware, it has your controls for both microphone inputs. They're very basic controls. They're on, off, and your volume up and down. All right, very, very simple. This is just for turning them on and off and bumping the levels just a little bit to make sure you're hitting those proper levels for broadcast. And that's pretty much it. There's limited functionality here, but that's really all you need in a broadcast situation, is just the ability to get to them quick, adjust levels, turn on, off, things like that. In addition to that, you have on every single input this section right here, which has 6 different buttons. And we recognize these are the same up here, that give you on-off functionality and your volume up and down. This particular button here is called Audio Follows Video. So this is going to say if I select that, and if I went through these, as you can see on input 4, which is my laptop, the audio is live there because that is what you have selected for it. So when you select 4, audio follows video, the audio will come from there. If I select 3, you'll see that audio will come in through input 3. There's nothing coming through that right now, but then over here we've got my camera, my overhead camera here is coming through here. So if I have audio on that, that's what will be feeding the broadcast, the program mix. And as you can see, input 1, same thing. And the way to turn off audio follows video is you have to hit off on each channel. Now, if you want audio from just one source, let's say you have a lavalier mic running through your camera, and then that audio signal is being transmitted to the ATEM Mini Pro over HDMI, you can just turn that on here. So for instance, I have audio coming in from input 1, and that's going to be my main camera here, and that's where I will get audio from if I have this on. So that does it for the hardware. There's not a lot of controls, but there's just enough to get you through a broadcast. You're able to control your mix with the volume up and down arrows, which adjusts the fader in the software on all of them, on both microphone inputs and all 4 HDMI inputs. So let's take a look at the software and see how you can make the audio coming into the ATEM Mini and ATEM Mini Pro sound professional. Here's the main page that you come to when you open up the ATEM software control. This is where you do all of your video switching. Down here, the 3rd button over at the bottom is the audio tab. Now, Blackmagic, they tout their audio engine, their audio editing software. It's called Fairlight. And they've brought some of that over here to the broadcast side. Very, very minimal. It's basically your EQ and dynamics and some very simple features here. So here's where you can see all of your inputs, and there's only 6 plus a master fader. Now up here at the top, you have a gain knob, and you have to understand, depending on what you're working on, depends on actually what you're affecting. So for instance, on the HDMI inputs, this is what's called a trim. It's not a preamp, it's not a microphone preamp, it's a trim level. So you're taking this line level signal that's coming in and you're trimming it up and down just a little bit so that you're hitting nominal on your input levels. Over here on the microphone 1 and 2 input, this is where you're adjusting the preamp. So when you have a microphone plugged in, you come in here and you talk and you adjust that gain first. So you've got a nominal level coming to the input of the ATEM Mini Pro. Moving down from there, we have the EQ section. So if I came in here, it brings up a window where we can do a couple of very simple but very powerful things. First of all, what we want to do is for most audio, especially in this kind of environment, we want to put a high pass filter. This will get rid of any, hitting the table booms or something that your mic might pick up if it hits something, or you have muffled noises around you in other rooms, or someone hits something, and it'll usually make a low noise, a low frequency noise. So you want to put a high pass filter. And basically what we're doing is we're just rolling off all the low end information. That's it. So we'll come in here, and band 1 is already selected as a low pass filter. You can see here that the frequency curve is a roll off. So on every single one of these bands, you can select what you want. It actually has 4 what we call fully parametric bands, and that's where you can select a shelf, a peak, a dip, or a cut. I think we'll call that a cut, and then a high shelf. So this is a low shelf. This is a high shelf. When you look here, this is your frequency that you're selecting. So you can select which frequency you want here, or you can grab it up here and actually drag it on the GUI itself. This determines which frequency grouping you're in. So this is low, low mids, high mids, and highs. And then you have your gain, which boosts or cuts that in the GUI there, if you can see that. Boosts or cut. Now, one interesting thing about this interface is on all these knobs, you're grabbing and you're pulling to the left or right to adjust. And that's on everything, because for frequency, okay, I guess that makes sense because your frequency node up here is moving left and right. But on the gain, you're also going left and right, but it's moving up and down. Seems weird. Like, majority of the time what you're doing is you're turning it up or down. It doesn't really matter what parameter you're looking at, you're usually turning it up or down. So frequency up or frequency down. So normally you're grabbing it and moving your cursor up, but it doesn't want to do that in this interface. You're going to the left and right, which is just odd to me. Just in the way that I normally work, it's very odd. So like I said, this actually has a dedicated high pass and low pass filter. Now, when would you want to put a high pass filter in? Well, sometimes you may have some high-end information that you don't like, or the room is too noisy or something. You can do a low pass filter, but normally what I would do for that is I'd go to band number 5 here, and I would do a high shelf and then just cut the high-end information there, maybe bring the frequency down like that. But what we're going to do, and what actually started this conversation, is we're going to put in a high pass filter. So we've got band number 1 here. It's not working until you select it. And then you can see our roll off here. And we've got usually, I don't know, around 1, depending on the frequency of the person talking. If they have a really deep voice, I'll usually go around 110 to 125. If not, I'll usually go around 150, just to make sure all that, or a lot of that low end information is cut out. We're actually going to get rid of this. I don't really want that on. Let's see, we'll actually take the highs and we'll make it a peak. Turn it back on, and we are going to, you can boost it a little bit in the 5K range, 4.5 to 5K range, depending on what you hear. This usually can make vocals pop a little bit more, dialogue pop a little bit more. And then I'll usually do what's called a seek and destroy on the EQ. So I'll listen back to the person talking on the microphone, and I will narrow this using the Q, or the bandwidth. So I'll actually narrow it really, really as tight as it can go, and I'll boost it, and then I'll start sweeping the frequencies in the low mids here. And usually around, I don't know, 200 to 250, depending on the microphone, I'll find it, and then I will cut it. And I'll usually cut it like that and maybe bring the bandwidth a little bit wider, depending on what I here. It's very important, especially when you're doing EQ, to listen with your ears and trust your ears to make those decisions, because sometimes just looking at the visual, you think that's what it is, but it sounds horrible. It all depends on frequency response of microphones and exactly what kind of sound you're looking for. If you're looking for a really low end bassy voice, you're not going to do the roll off that we have on here. It just doesn't make sense because you want that low end information. So it all depends on what you want to do. For broadcast, I'll usually do a high pass on vocals, because most vocal information, unless there's another resonance in the room, isn't going to hit that low. So that is EQ. We have a lot of options here. If your levels are going down, they do have a makeup gain over here as well. That's just turning your overall volume up to send the appropriate amount of signal to the next thing we're going to look at, which is the dynamics. So over in the dynamics tab, we actually have 3 different dynamics processors. So yes, we do have an expander and a gate, a compressor and a limiter. So what we'll do is we'll look at the expander gate first. So just some basics on expander gates. What normally happens with an expander gate, or let's say a gate. So we have a gate, and what that does is that basically mutes the audio, cuts off the audio until it hits a certain threshold. And as soon as it hits that threshold, it opens up the audio. So if I've got a kick drum or a snare drum, something like that, or even a vocal, sometimes, usually don't use it too much on vocals because it can be a little harsh. But if it hits a certain threshold, it'll open that up. Usually you do this on drum kits to make sure that certain drums don't bleed or cymbals don't bleed into the drum mics, that kind of thing. That's usually what a gate is used for, to mute something until it hits the right level that it's going to let it through. So let's look at expanders. They're kind of like a compressor, and we'll get into compressors in a minute, but expanders, what they will do is they take a signal that reaches a certain threshold and it expands it. It boosts the signal so you have a good level all the time if it hits that certain threshold. So basically what an expander does. A compressor, on the other hand, takes the low level information and the loud information and evens it out. So you set a certain threshold that if it hits this threshold, it's going to keep it down. It'll actually keep the level where you want it. And you can set all this stuff. Compressors are pretty good for broadcast. I actually recommend using them for broadcast because they will help. They'll help keep your levels in check. Where they may fall short in that, and you have to listen, again, use your ears, is you have to make sure you are not compressing too much. If you're compressing too much, what'll happen is you'll hear your signal get too quiet. So they have the makeup gain over here. And so when you're compressing down, let's say 6 to 10 dB, it's going down 6 to 10 dB. So you need to make up that gain. So they have a makeup gain over here that you can turn up to make up what you've lost in level. What comes along with that, though, is if you are compressing too much and you go and you turn up your makeup gain, you also are bringing up that noise floor. So if you have a noisy mic with a little bit of hiss, you don't hear it too much when you're just listening to the signal. But if you compress it and then turn everything up, it'll turn up that noise floor and you'll get that hiss. So you have to be very careful with the compressor. I usually use it just to control my peaks. So if somebody's talking, I'll usually compress it enough where I'm getting about 3 to 5 dB of gain reduction, and you'd see that here. And then you'll also, I have a pretty quick attack, so it grabs it, and then I have a pretty quick release. So it's really just, they're talking and it's just grabbing it and just holding it right here. So if it goes too high, it just grabs it and pushes it down, then it releases it and keeps it there. Then if it starts to go too high, it just grabs it, pushes it down, and then releases it again. And I usually have a relatively loose compression ratio. And the higher you get in compression ratio, the more compressed it's going to sound. So I usually have about a 2 to 1, 2.5 to 1. That's about my max on dialogue. They also have a limiter in here, which is great. I would usually use this on the master bus, which they do have here, and I would use it to limit my entire broadcast. So if I say, okay, or somebody comes to me and says, you cannot peak this level, you cannot go past this level, I will set that at that level to make sure that I don't exceed that. So you'll turn on your limiter here, and depending on, I'll usually play back what will be the loudest part of the presentation or the show, if I have it available to me, and then I will set my threshold when I'm just tickling the gain reduction. That's about it. Sometimes I won't even do that. So it's up to you whether you want to actually use the limiter. Again, it can save your butt if something peaks hard and you have to stick to broadcast standards, and you could be SOL if that happens. So they have a pretty good offering on the ATEM Mini Pro of dynamics and EQ. A lot of dynamic processing, which is great. You can make things sound really good, especially, let's say, if you've got a music track coming in on one of these tracks, like this is my Pro Tools track. If you had, or my Pro Tools HDMI input, if you had music coming back from that, if you're doing playback from that, and you want to make sure it stays level, you can throw some compression on it. You can throw even a limiter on it if you want. With music, I'd probably just hit a limiter, so I'm staying at that peak level. So let's do a little bit of comparison between what I do on the ATEM Mini Pro and what we see in the software. So if you look over here on mic 1 and 2, if I hit the on and off buttons, you'll see that toggle on and off. Okay. If I use the volume up and down button, you'll see that's bringing the volume about 3 dB each time you're hitting down. And back up, you're getting about the same. So about 3 dB every time you hit that. So you have to be very careful. That isn't super precise. If you want to come in to the software here and do some fine tuning, this is where you have to do it, is actually in the software itself. On our HDMI inputs, if you look in the software, if I turn on audio follows video, you'll see it there, audio follows video. Okay. And then on off, if it's depending on which mode you're rolling in. So on off and audio files video. Now, if you look at it here, I didn't talk about this button up here. This is the reset button. If I go over to, let's say, my main input in the software, and I turn it down, and I want it to reset to 0, I just hit reset and it'll reset. But one thing to note is it will not reset your panning. So panning, you probably won't use this too much in broadcast because usually your microphones, your lav mics or your shotgun mics are going to be dead center. You want them dead center. So you probably won't be using panning too much. The exception to that is if you have a source coming into your mic 1 and 2 and you want to hear it in stereo, we'll have to come in here and pan those hard left and right. If you look below that in the software, there's this headphone icon that's grayed out. And the reason why it's grayed out is because we don't have headphones on this device. On some of their big switchers, they do have a headphone out, so you can control that here. All right, so that's pretty much it on the audio tab. That kind of gives you an idea of everything you have available to you here. So now we're going to look into how to change your microphone inputs to a line level signal. Let me talk just briefly about why this is a good idea. So on the back of the ATEM Mini and the ATEM Mini Pro, it says microphone input, and that's true. You can plug a microphone into here. And the reason why you do that is because if you have a microphone, you're going to be hitting a microphone preamp. Now, preamp, for those of you that don't know, is just an amplifier that amplifies that signal, that microphone signal. It's a low-level signal, so it needs to amplify it to what we call line-level signal to be able to run through our equipment properly and to hit processing properly and those kind of things. It's a better operational level than microphone level. So you need that preamp to boost that signal. So this has both. This actually has microphone preamp and a line level input. They're the same input, but what you have to do is you have to go into the software and change it to a line level input. Now, when would you use that? Obviously, if you're coming off of a separate mixer and you're running out of that into here, you want to change it to line level. The main reason for this is because if you have it on the microphone input, you are hitting a preamp, which is expecting a lot lower level signal. Now you'll probably be okay, but when you run a line level signal into a preamp, it's expecting that lower level, so you can hit it too hard, and it could happen by accident. If you start with your levels low, this may not happen, but if for some reason your levels are nominal in the mixer and you hit those preamps, it could damage the preamps, and that's probably something you don't want to do. Now, are these the best preamps on this thing for the price? No, they're not. They're very, very basic, and they're just there to get the job done. But a line level input is just a line level input. It's just expecting something from another preamp source. So for instance, if you have an external mixer, like I have a little rack mount mixer over here that spits out line level, and I can just run it right into here. Perfect. So let's go into the software here and we'll take a look and see how you change it from a mic level to a line level. So back here in the ATEM software control, and it really doesn't matter which tab you're on. You could be on any of these, and you can just click on, we'll go to the audio tab because this is an audio thing. You click on this little cog down here, this little sprocket, and it has a lot of other features you can have. Like here on multi-view, I can, on the ATEM, this is on the ATEM Mini Pro, you can come in here and customize what you see on your multi-viewer. If we go into the audio tab, this is where you're going to do it. It has some options here. We'll look at those in just a minute. But let's go here where it has analog inputs. Here's where you select, right now they are on microphone input. If you select those, now they are on line input. One thing that I wish they would do is when you do that, they would update the interface here, but they don't. It just says mic 1 and 2. But at least you'll know that there is a line level input, or it's set to receive a line level input. So while we're in this general tab, there's one other thing here that you can select where it says hard cut audio when switching, or add a transition to audio when switching. This is basically for switching between two sources that have audio. Do you want it to be a hard cut where it just goes from one to the other, or do you want like a dissolve, like a fade? Dissolve in video, fade in audio. All right, so another tab in this, in these settings, these audio settings, is one called split audio. And if you select these, you can go through and it splits out every single input. And as you can see behind, our mixer is getting bigger. So if I come back over here, every HDMI input, the audio coming from that HDMI input is now, that stereo channel is now split out into two individual mono channels. So you kind of think, well, why would you do that? Well, have you ever been in the situation where you were running, let's say, two lavalier mics, and you've got one of those cables that'll combine them together? One ends up on the left side, and one ends up on the right side, or I guess for you guys, left, right? So what this allows you to do, if you just had the HDMI input coming in, your microphones would be panned hard left and hard right. So what this allows you to do is to take those two signals in, and instead of having them panned hard left and right, this is how they would be if you just had them coming straight through the HDMI, you can now come in and zero those out. So I'm just going to double tap here, 0, double click and 0, and we'll just zero those out. Now they're equally feeding left and right, and you don't have to worry about hard left or hard right. So many videos that I've seen, sometimes it just, you don't have time, or something else is going on, you can't figure it out. But you always want to have your dialogue pan center. So that's pretty much it on this tab. Everything else, if you see right here, so this input number 1 on my mains, whatever I do on the controller here, it's going to follow it for both those channels, because both those channels are coming from the HDMI 1 input. So now we need to address one of the biggest issues with the ATEM Mini and the ATEM Mini Pro. It is that there's a delay in the video signal and the audio signal coming in to your mic 1 and 2. This is because HDMI is just naturally delayed. And you've probably heard a bunch of other guys who've reviewed this say that same thing. It's just naturally delayed. That's just how HDMI works. And that is probably the biggest issue with this switcher, is just that you can't delay your audio inputs at all. So if I had my lavalier mic plugged directly into here, it works and it sounds great, but it'll be off sync. Now, by how much, I've seen some people say around 3 frames. I've seen other people say about 6 frames. It's not a lot. And if this is your last ditch option, and that's the only way you can get audio in, just do it, because it probably people will probably go, oh, that's kind of weird, but most people won't even notice. So it's not terribly noticeable to the average person. Now, all of us who are in production, yeah, we're going to notice. The option to get past this is to run it into an external mixer that has some kind of delay functionality on it. Like I said, my rack mount mixer over here has a delay output, has a delay function, and I'm not talking like a time-based effect delay that you'd put on a vocal. I'm actually talking about delaying the output of the mixer so it lines up with your video. And you do have to kind of step up sometimes into a different, a higher tier mixer to get that functionality. Sometimes it's not going to be there. It probably will never be there in those lower end mixers. Some of the portable recorders have those, but at that point you're recording to a portable recorder. So even if you have to use that to be able to get the delay to this device, maybe that's something you'll just have to look into doing. But I would recommend getting some sort of small format, either desktop digital mixer or rack mount digital mixer that allows you to delay that output. So really that's kind of the biggest issue with this box. Other than that, the audio, the audio functionality and features that they give you is, it's basic, but it's there. It's kind of interesting to think that for $600 and even $300 for the ATEM Mini, you're getting all this functionality with audio. And as an audio engineer, that makes me very happy because I can go in and adjust my voice to what I need it to be for a broadcast and other people's voices and make sure they all kind of blend together well, which is basically what you're doing when you're adding equalization and compression. You're trying to make everything gel together, blend together well. So you can do it the software gives you a little bit more functionality as far as being able to fine tune those levels. But if you're in a pinch and it's just you and you can't keep going over to the ATEM software control, you do have some volume control here, which is awesome. It's very basic, but at least it's there. So that is it for this video. Comment below and let me know what else you guys want to see about this. Like I said, I know there's a lot of videos out there with guys that are exponentially more smarter than me about the video side of this, and I am learning from them, but the audio side I feel like I have my head around. So comment below and let me know if there's anything else you want me to go over, and whether you're going to get one or not, and would you get the Pro or would you just stick with the Mini, the regular Mini? So far this has been a really cool device to have. I've done a couple little broadcasts with it and it worked really well. So I hope you guys like that. Be sure to comment, subscribe, get the bell on whenever we post a new video. You'll get notified, and share it if you like with your friends. Let them know that we're here. It also helps us out a lot. And you can thumb up me if you like this video. The other one's there too if you really want to do it. I'd like you to do this one if you could. But that is it for this video, and I want to thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.